Hey Enneagram friends, I'm Abby, an IA accredited Enneagram teacher and certified somatic practitioner. My work has always been an invitation for greater self-awareness and really a compassionate curiosity for the world. And I offer that invitation through corporate Enneagram workshops, private coaching, and educational resources like this podcast. In this season of the podcast, I'm inviting fellow Enneagram teachers, authors, and practitioners into the podcast space to share with you about personal growth, all through the lens of their personal type structure. So today on the podcast, we have Dr. Joy Pedersen, who shares about her growth journey and experience through the lens of Type 5. Let me share with you just a little bit about Joy before we jump into our conversation together. So, Dr. Joy Pedersen is the owner of Clarity Collective, which provides coaching and consulting services. She's experienced working with individuals and teams to manage change, transition, growth, loss, work-life balance, and other challenges in order to achieve their fullest potential. She also offers customized trainings on a variety of topics, including leadership, organization, time management, and cultural diversity. So I hope you'll listen in with curiosity and compassion as we hear from Dr. Joy Pedersen about her experience as a Type 5. Well, Joy, thank you for being here. Thank you for saying yes to being in an Enneagram space, an Enneagram conversation with me. It's a gift to get to learn from you and for our listeners to get to glean some wisdom from you. So thank you for saying yes.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. So, I would love for us to be able to explore specifically Type 5 and really efforts around growth, what that's looked like, the growing edges of your type structure. Obviously, you could teach us about all the 9 types as an Enneagram practitioner, but really focusing on your experience and the gift of getting to learn from your story and your journey. So if we can kind of start back at the beginning, though, of when did you learn your type? How did it come about? Did it hit you right away, or was there kind of some dancing around between the other types before you landed on 5?
There was some dancing around for sure. I learned about the Enneagram probably 4 years ago now, and there was a consultant who was working with my organization, who mentioned it to me. She wasn't using it with our group, but she pulled me aside and she said, "I think you might like this tool, this thing called the Enneagram." And I Googled it, and this was before the pandemic, and I saw the diagram and it looked really intimidating, and I thought, "No, that's really not for me." And I think I even bought a book that was written in the '70s, and it had a lot of words and not very many pictures, and even though I have a PhD, it's hard for me sometimes to dive into those thick textbooks. So, um, I kinda set it aside, but I think as many things in life do, what's meant for you is gonna find you, and so, I came across a 2-day workshop in Arizona, and the Enneagram just kept coming up for me, so I signed up, my sister and I went, and I loved it. I think having someone explain it in person and, to hear other people talk about their type and how it kind of manifests for them, um, really resonated with me. So I was hooked after that 2-day. It was an Enneagram Institute workshop, and I signed up with Jerome Wagner for his intensive certification course, and it was up in San Francisco right around the time of the International Enneagram Association conference.
Okay.
And I started posting a few things on my Instagram account, just little memes and like facts about the Enneagram. And then COVID happened. And as you know, so many of us turned to social media for connection. And everything I posted about the Enneagram got a lot of attention, a lot of likes, a lot of follows, and people commenting. And I thought, wow, there's a whole community out here that I could potentially tap into. And so I just ended up in those 2 years, I learned so much about the Enneagram. A ton of new books came out with a lot. That were a lot more accessible, colorful pictures and I think better, shorter descriptions. And anyway, so I've done a lot of different things with the Enneagram. Talking about how I found my type, a lot of folks have typed me as a 9 or a 3. And I really trace that back to my childhood, my cultural upbringing. I was raised in a collectivistic culture, so my mom's Asian, and there was a lot of people pleasing, a lot of messaging around the nail that sticks up gets hammered down, don't
Mhm.
complain, don't bring shame to your family, allow people to save face, everyone should get along. And those are very nine-ish messages.
Yeah.
And then I'm also, the firstborn in the United States. My mom came over from Thailand, and, so there was a lot of achievement also, ingrained in us in childhood, being the best, being number 1. School was the most important thing, and, uh, and that also kind of manifests itself in the 3. So
Yeah.
I've learned how to be a 9 and I've learned how to be a 3, but at my core, when I think about my tendencies, how I respond under stress, what I would rather be doing, and a lot of those are 5-ish qualities. I'm pretty
Yeah.
introverted. I need a lot of downtime. I'm a mental processor. I'm an observer. My first inclination is to withdraw from crisis. So those are things I've had to unlearn or address and in order to achieve the things that I really do wanna achieve and have the relationships that I wanna have. So, I always tell
Yeah.
people, you know, addressing the blind spots is not about becoming something that you're not or being someone that you're not. It's learning how to integrate your natural tendencies with other tools in order to get what you really want.
Yeah, for sure. When I love even just the language of like unlearning, and there's lots of different facets and spaces that we can talk about the unlearning. But even, thinking about so many of these attributes of type 9 and type 3 being ingrained in, and then, a lot of times when we come across our type, there's almost like a making peace with where we land on the diagram. And so I wonder what that experience of like kind of making peace with 5, did that feel like a lot of solidarity? Or was there, some hard parts that felt maybe a little bit sensitive to shine the light on about that type 5 structure as you're settling into that being the point you land on?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I struggle with making peace with the 5 is, my relationship around energy. So, the 5 has, like a metaphorical, um, tank, like a battery or a tank of energy, and so, for me at least, I'm always thinking about how much energy do I have left and what do I have left to do in the day, and then I'm metering out, it's that stinginess of the 5, right? I'm metering out my energy so that I don't run out. Versus maybe a 7 who has, like, more of a well of energy where they just dig deeper, and they can find the energy there. And so I've tried a lot of different strategies, but, at the end of the day, it's that part of being a 5 is, I think, the hardest for me to overcome um, or I don't know what the word would be, but, address because
Mhm.
it feels so real for me. It literally feels like I will not have the energy to do one more thing. Um, so when you talk about making peace, I think there's a lot of aspects of the 5 that I've learned to strategize around. Like, I notice when I have that natural inclination to withdraw, and then I can make a choice, and I can actually engage if I want to. But the energy sometimes it really feels like it's not gonna be there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I love those two pieces that you mentioned of like the withdrawing and having some strategies around that, and then also this energy piece. But I wonder if we could talk about the withdrawing piece because as a fellow coach, this is one of the pieces that come up often. Whether it's that things are really chaotic and people are pushing or pulling on the 5, and there's just this feeling of I will not survive unless I step away, or I have to shut the door and now my kids are banging on the other side needing my attention, but like I will not survive if I stay there 1 minute longer. And so I'm curious what that process has been like for you, and maybe even some of the practical strategies around withdrawing and kind of balancing out that reactivity in your type structure.
Yeah, there's definitely still that feeling that I won't survive if I don't take this time away, and so I've tried to, knowing that about myself, build in breaks and opportunities to have alone time and sort of backup safety measures for when I get to that point. But a lot of what motivates me when I'm in those spaces is thinking about my intention and my impact. So if my intention is to have a relationship or support someone I care about or be there for a friend and I withdraw, then I'm missing that opportunity to be aligned. So my impact is going to be the opposite. They're going to feel abandoned or let down or disappointed or and so sometimes that gives me the energy or the motivation to do the thing that maybe doesn't feel like something like my favorite thing to do. And the same at work, right? I want to network. I want people to know who I am. I need to be available to people when they need my services. So I cannot just sit in my office with my door closed, which is what I would love to do all day. But that's not going to be successful or impactful in the way that I want my life to be led. So sometimes it's finding that motivation and then recognizing, okay, if I do that thing that I know I want to do that aligns with my intention, how do I make space then for the thing that I also know I need, which is time and space and processing. Um, so
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's so interesting because it's almost this, you're not talking yourself into something. It's reminding yourself of what you've already identified to be true, which is I care about this conversation. I care about the work that I do in the world. I care about these spaces that take up energy. And so, like, how do I make space for what I also care about? I think um, having a lot of mantras and things like that in my individual coaching and the things that come up, sometimes people feel like, are you trying to trick me into being motivated? And it's no, like I'm using your words to remind you of what you've already named to be true, which is I care about this. This matters to me. And so if I can bring some awareness to that, then that pulls me forward instead of it feeling like, I'm getting dragged into something or pushed into something. And so I love that language you even used.
yeah.
Yeah.
And some of it has been, like you mentioned, little kids knocking on the door, and some of it has been training or explaining to my family and my daughter, like, this is what I really need, and I will come out a much better person, a much nicer mom, a kinder, more generous mom. But I need you to leave me, when they're old enough to leave you alone for a few minutes, like, I need you to leave me alone so I can come back and be a better mom.
Mhm.
Um, so that's how I've kind of addressed some of those family obligations. I also have a couple of examples in my life of times where I chose to withdraw and missed something really important, and it's
Mm,
those memories, I think, that also inspire me to show up when I would rather stay at home, because there are
yeah.
some things in life that you just never get back.
Mm,
One of those, my one of my really good friends, her dad passed away several years ago,
mm,
and the day of his memorial service, I remember thinking, "I'm so tired. I'm not gonna go. It's not that big of a deal if I miss it. She knows that I care for her. There's gonna be a lot of other people there. It's gonna be this big social event that I don't wanna engage in right now." And I really, of all the days of my life, that's one day I wish I could go back and do over again, because it was really
yeah.
important to her. And yeah, so those are the types of things where I think about, a year, 10 years from now, am I going to wish I was there at that event or there for my friend that day? So,
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting, even as you talk about that, because what I hear in you, there might be emotions around that as you remember it, but it feels like as I hear you say that it's not this like should that is guilt driven. It's really this perspective that now you've collected of like realizing what it felt like, or even in hindsight, remembering it. Talk about fives being past oriented, but also being able to take that intelligence and put it into the future and strategize for like, how do I want to do this moving forward? And so I loved even the way that you talked about that because it's almost like information that you've collected to do it in more better, but like in more a greater alignment with how you want to be in the world, in that relationship and that friendship. And so that's like really helpful to even hear you articulate that. Yeah.
yeah. And
Um,
we are totally past oriented.
Oh, I love that. Well, and I think as an eight who is a self-preservation eight, so I have a lot of five tendencies, and at times I will think like, am I really an eight? Am I actually just a five? Um, and the reality is no, because I could do with the gift of fives being able to slow down and mull over things. I could do with that gift, and I don't have it. I have to incorporate practices for it. And so that past orientation, I'm sure there are times that it trips you up, but it is also a tremendous gift in being able to move forward more thoughtfully the next time. So, yeah. The other piece that you had talked about was that energy, and I know that you said that it's a growth edge now, right? And I think as I've been entering into these conversations with different Enneagram teachers, constantly this concept comes up of like, and I'm still growing, and I'm still working on this, and this is still, even in one space, it feels like I've balanced this reactivity out. And then a new person comes in my life, or a new transition, or a new job, or whatever, and it feels like we start back over again because it's a new change that we're navigating. So with that in mind, when you think about that energy reserve, have there been some practices that like have been helpful, or maybe even things as you've worked with other fives and workshops and coaching spaces that feel like some of the practices that maybe people might try out as kind of these practices in their toolkit with that energy reserve?
Yeah, well, I use a lot of the same strategies that I use whenever I'm trying to channel a different strength of the Enneagram. So, for example, I don't love public speaking, but it aligns with my intention. And so when I have to go on stage, there's a couple things that I'll do. Sometimes I'll think of a dynamic person in my life, like someone close to me, not a movie star or a celebrity, but someone that I work with or someone in my family that's good at that thing. And then I will think to myself, what would that person do? Because
Mm-hmm.
I know them so well, I know how they would respond. So, for example, my sister is really, she's a quintessential hostess. And so if I have to host an event, I think, what would Joan do? Well, she would welcome her guests and she would take their coat and she would offer them a drink and she would ask them how they're doing. And so I just try to channel that person. Another strategy I use is putting on the cape. So if I don't really know someone who's good at that thing, then I imagine the type and like the cape or the hat or the lenses of that type. What would that type do in this situation? So when it comes to energy, I have a lot of friends who are eights, and they to me are sort of this quintessential energy machine. Like they have energy, they find energy. So sometimes I would think to myself, what would they do? And a lot of them work out every day. And I have sort of pushed myself, especially when my energy is low, to just get in a little workout or go out and do something. Movement
Yeah.
is huge. And that does actually give me more energy. I think
Mhm.
that has helped. So I have some strategies that I use to channel different types, and I do that with the energy too, like thinking about a person who would jump at the chance to do one more thing before the end of the day.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because even as you talk about, this putting on, or, the cape, the hat, the glasses, the description before that is really all these observations you've made of the type, not just intellectually from a textbook about the type, but like these are the people and you've watched them. And I feel that so much as a self-preservation, like eight with a lot of five tendencies, so much of what I know in the world, I think I've just watched someone else do it first and then I learned. Everything from, how to enter into small talk in a big group because my social instinct is blind for me. So that is a hard space. All the way to like navigating social media and, some of the things that, we were just chatting before of like it being hard to always keep up on social media. And so much of learning how to navigate it was just watching what other people were doing. And sometimes I would read blogs, but mostly it was just observing and then figuring it out. And so I love that piece of it that you mentioned of just it's not just the taking on, it's the like, but I paid attention before that moment, and so I knew how to channel that or to take it on. I think that's a really like keen point out of that type five structure, but also just a good strategy too. Yeah.
Yeah, I've learned also that, other people have done it and they didn't die or they didn't get fired or they didn't lose everything, and so that has helped me too. Like some of the things that to me seem like, oh my gosh, if I did that, life would be over, my career would be over, my relationship would be over. Or even like setting a boundary, like if I set a boundary, my relationship will be over. And then I look at
Mhm.
other people who are doing it in their relationships and their relationships aren't over. So then I tell myself, okay, it's possible. It's other
Mhm.
people are doing it, even though for me it feels like the end of the world.
Yeah. Right. And even that simple invitation, it pulls us out of our like egocentric, like just the way that we are thinking about it and realizing like, oh, all these other people are doing this and they're surviving awkwardness or failure or a mistake, right? Like because I think we just get so wrapped up, no matter what our type is, we get so wrapped up in our stuff and realizing like, oh no, actually people do this every day. Like and this is
Yeah.
a thing that I can do too. And again,
And
it's like another piece of information you're collecting.
and for the 5, it's looking foolish. There's,
Mm.
like, nothing probably I fear more than looking incompetent or foolish, making a fool out of myself, and then you look around, there's I mean, we were just like you said, we were talking about Reels and Instagram, and people are out there looking foolish all day
Doing
long,
their thing. Yeah, and it's great. Like people
and maybe
love
it's
it.
even a good thing, right?
Yeah. Totally. But and I think it's helpful that you named that of and I think people would probably use obviously their own language as they describe their career or their field of expertise. But it's on a basic level, it's that fear of looking foolish, of like that you don't know or that you're not a voice of reason or there's not competence. And that is not as simple as it might be for someone else to jump into that because their type structure doesn't care, it doesn't trigger them as much as it does for the five. So I think it's so helpful that you named that too. Yeah. I'm curious as you uh, think, whether it's in this current season or even back on when you were first learning the Enneagram. Sometimes there are things when we first learn about our type that don't immediately resonate, and they kind of resonate later on, whether it's a new season or it just settles more, and then you start to see it with new awareness. Is there any pieces of the Enneagram Type Five structure that you didn't resonate with immediately and then it kind of landed later?
I would say the part that still doesn't resonate strongly, but I'm starting to see maybe where it plays out a little bit is, the doing repressed. I feel like I'm more feelings repressed than doing
Mhm.
repressed, and maybe that's just being the 5 in that center, you know, the 5 is in the doing repressed center, but I think it's also disconnected from the heart. So, I'm not afraid of doing. Like, I'm actually people look at me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're doing a lot. You're" like, I lean into the doing. I don't take a long time. Like, once I think of an idea, I'm charging ahead, planning a vacation. I don't feel like I have to do a lot of research like a lot of 5s do, where they endlessly research and have to know everything. But there are places where I notice I haven't leaned into doing. So, for example, I live in the same town that I grew up in, which I love. It's a great town. But I notice that there are, many other people don't live in their hometown. They've gone off and, they moved around a lot or they've moved to another town. Um, so I feel like that's a little bit where the 5 has me doing repressed, and I have been in the same job for 20 years, which is also kind of unusual. Um, I love my job, and I've been really fortunate to work in a place where I could stay for 20 years. But, again, other people jump into other things or are maybe more impulsive, especially after the pandemic. We see people moving around a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and so that makes me kind of pause and reflect and observe my own behaviors in that realm of doing repressed. But I haven't found a lot of places where that has manifested itself,
Hmm.
'cause I'm pretty active, but I do think, like, right now I'm working on some heart opening work because, that's something I think that the 5 can really benefit from.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I often teach about stances when I teach in corporate spaces, especially. But I don't talk about the, doing, feeling, intellect, thinking, repressed, because I think it doesn't always land. And sometimes I feel like I have to give so many caveats and nuances to get it to land that doesn't really work in a group, right? If I'm in individual coaching, like we could talk through some like it could be this, it could be this. And so I think you're not alone in that because I've kind of gotten to the place where I just realize like I just don't think this lands as much. And I think this is more of an individual like coaching space and also like an individual discovery space of like, does that resonate and does that show up here? Um, and even thinking about the fives that I've, whether been in relationship with or even in a coaching space, oftentimes I feel like the do repress has more to do with the way that they talk about it. And so maybe this will land, maybe it won't, but it seems like it has a lot to do with the presence of like being physically present. So like thinking about doing less as a action and more of like a body, like physically
Um,
being present. Um, and so both in relationships, not just detaching, but like being physically present. Or when things have too much affect, oftentimes at type 5 structure, it feels like that is just sucking all the energy and the well is going dry. And so sometimes the type 5 structure will make excuses for why they don't like need to be in the family argument or at the family reunion or the things that feel really like emotionally chaotic. And so it has less to do with action and more like physical body presence of like, I'm still here and I'm here in real time, not physically present, mentally absent, but like I'm actually here. So I don't know how that lands. I just thought I'd offer that back.
yeah, I definitely will get into my like mind palace headspace, and in a conversation or in a meeting, we'll kind of zone out and start going into my head. So I do have to work on that, like leaning in. And there are some things that I actually have, again, the strategies put into place so that I can at least appear more present. Because I'm like a journaler, a note taker, a writer, and a lot of times, like in a meeting, I'll be writing, and I've learned that that behavior is really not great at helping people feel like I'm listening or connected. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I definitely can relate to that, and I'm sure all my previous partners would also relate to that.
So in those moments when notice that either mentally absent even though you're physically there or journaling or noting, is it just that you bring awareness to it and you simply look up, or are there other things that you do to kind of tether yourself into the present moment?
I try to get more in my body for sure, like noticing how am I feeling? But then I get into the noticing again, which is in my head, right? So I have to just
Yeah.
sort of have that balance, but like getting grounded, noticing my feet on the ground, my,
Mhm.
butt in my chair, my opening my heart,
Mhm.
in order to connect with folks. But I've
Yeah, for
also
sure.
realized like I do a lot of coaching on the phone, and sometimes not having that effort of having to like send all the bodily listening signals
Yeah.
allows me to be more, thinking and listening and observing, and then actually I think provide a better service to my clients because I'm
Hmm.
not working so hard to make them feel like I'm
You're
listening,
listening?
because I am listening.
Yeah.
But
No, for sure. And that totally makes sense, right? If it's not this intuitive, this is a natural byproduct of, then half of your attention is divided to making it look like you're listening because you already are listening. And so that's also helpful that you know that about yourself. So you're not wasting extra energy on that,
yeah,
and just doing
and
it
they
over the
can't see
phone.
me taking notes, like I'm taking a ton of notes on what they're saying and then circling and starring, and
Yeah.
but I think, if you're in the actual presence of someone who's doing that, it's very distracting. Like, what are you writing down? And what do you,
What did you write on your paper?
yeah, what am I
Yeah.
saying that you're starring?
I know. Well, but I also think like you gave such a helpful like gold nugget about just physically noticing your felt sense of your body. The like your feet on the floor, your seat in the chair. I mean, it is amazing how much with so many different types of situations where whether someone's escaped because they're daydreaming or they've escaped into anxiety because they feel uncomfortable with the social nature of what's happening. But instead of just inviting them to like wiggle their toes in their shoes, that's what I always say, because no one can see it. But there's just something really simple of helping to like calm back your nervous system of like, I'm okay. Like I can feel my extremities. All of my attention has not gone into survival. And like I can be present and, and whatever it might be. So, yeah. Yeah. Um, I think we could talk forever, and we're only talking about one type. We also could have talked about all the other types too. But it is such a gift to get to hear about the type five structure, like from a firsthand account of someone that is very articulate about their type structure, because this is the work that you do, and this is the conversations that you're having in a professional setting, and I'm sure in a personal setting too. And so thank you for sharing some of that, and for us to get to learn from your journey and the narrative and the language that you offer. That's a real gift. So,
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
yeah. So before we go, though, I want to give some space for you to just share how people can get connected to you. So the work that you do, how they can plug into that, or tag along and learn what you're doing. If you would just share a little bit about your work and how people can get connected.
Yeah, so the easiest way to find me is probably still on Instagram. I'm Enneagram Clarity, and there are links there to my bio, my website, my email, some previous content. And also I have a newsletter, so you can sign up for my newsletter on Instagram through the link tree as well. And my company name is Clarity Collective. So if you wanted to find me that way. I do Enneagram coaching and consulting. I do a lot of workshops for teams. And I also do diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And so that's kind of an area that I'm growing into with the Enneagram and helping folks see how understanding the Enneagram can also help us have a more equitable and inclusive community world. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, I love that. And where are you located, or is a lot of your stuff virtual?
A lot of it's virtual. I'm in
Okay.
Central California. And I have been talking to a few folks here about doing some kind of in-person retreat or, we live in a beautiful area. So someday I would love to have folks here for a retreat, but I do a lot of it virtually. And I have traveled a little if folks are looking for that too. But
Yeah. Okay. Well, very cool. Well, thank you again for being here, and I hope this isn't the last time that we get to share in an
thank
Enneagram
you.
conversation together. So,
I
thanks for being
agree.
here.
Hope to see you in person someday.
Hey, Enneagram friend. Thanks for listening in to my conversation with Dr. Joy Pedersen. I hope that you are taking away lots of gold nuggets and a wealth of information about the Type 5 structure. If you found this episode helpful, would you do me a favor and share it with a friend and subscribe to the podcast so that you could hear the rest of the episodes this season? That's a great way to share this resource and to grow the community and the conversations around the Enneagram. Okay, friends, until next time.